If you're watching yesterday, like me, you watched with rapt attention as Shane and Pokey Stanford talked about their lives, their story. We promised that we would come back today with Shane and me together for whatever time we want to take, and I'm really glad we're going to take our time. But the book is entitled A Positive Life, Living with HIV as a Pastor, Husband, and Father. It's published by Zondervan. There's a foreword in here by Kay Warren, Rick Warren's wife. It's an absolutely gripping book, and I must say, Shane, as an author myself, exceptionally well written.
Oh, thank you.
I was so impressed with the way you wrote it. It just flows, and I think Moira yesterday called it a page turner. It really is.
Well, thank you.
And welcome back.
Thank you so much. Great to be back.
Now, there's going to be a lot of people watching this interview right now who didn't see yesterday, and so I want to recap a little bit,
Sure.
and then get into stuff that Moira wasn't able to cover. You were born a hemophiliac.
That's right.
It was diagnosed at an early age, and before we talk about the HIV diagnosis, what's it like as a little kid who wants to play football, who wants to run and jump and get in scraps, and what's it like to be a kid and to be a hemophiliac at the same time?
Well, and I was a mild hemophiliac, so the problem is that I could do a lot of things that most hemophiliacs could not do, but I would always push the limit and do something that would get me hurt. It's tough because I was a 100% boy. Wanted to build forts. I wanted to play football. Every day was an opportunity to be outside, swinging from a rope. Doing all of those things. But to know that you had limitations, and it was a struggle because my family loved sports. Thankfully, my grandfather at a very early age introduced me to golf.
Which is non-combative.
That's right. It's hard to hurt yourself playing golf. Yeah. But that was my way of being able to participate in sport and be competitive. But I have a lot of friends who are hemophiliacs who they couldn't do that. They had to take medicines every day. And that's the thing, is that if you got hurt, if you had a bleed of any kind, you had to take medicines, which were given intravenously, and it's also painful because most of the injuries were muscles or joint injuries.
Yeah, I didn't realize till reading the book that a big challenge with hemophilia is those internal injuries, the internal bleeding.
That's 90% of it. Most people think you're going to bleed out, but it's the injury on the inside, and it never really heals.
Yeah, like you sprain your ankle.
That's right.
And you're talking a major crisis.
Oh yeah, in fact today I still deal with a bad left ankle that I hurt playing Little League, the one year that I convinced the doctors to let me do that, back when I was 10 or 11 years old.
You wouldn't know how many times you've been to a doctor.
Oh goodness, no.
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 And how many times, well, maybe you could count the number of times you've been in the hospital.
Thankfully, I've not been in the hospital a lot in the last 10 or 15 years, but as a child, I was in the hospital a good bit, just one thing or another.
Now, how did it impact you at age 6 when your parents split?
It was tough. I did not see it coming. I had lived in a situation where my father was gone a lot traveling, and he was very busy doing his work. So my mom was the one who was always there. So when I saw them together, I thought everything was fine. The day after Christmas in 1977, my dad came home and told me that they had gotten a divorce. I remember going out on the front lawn and sitting there and crying because, my world had fallen apart.
Did you feel it was your fault?
I did for a while.
Isn't that the case for most kids when their parents split?
It is. In fact, as I've talked in my pastorate with people who come from divorced homes, there's always that element of thinking you've done something.
Right.
And I have to say that my parents were very good about saying, this is not your fault. But it's still, at that age, it's traumatic.
Your description of being in the middle of the tug of war, saying goodbye and saying hi, saying goodbye and saying hi. You say in the book, and I absolutely agree with you, but it really came through so poignantly, no kid deserves that.
No, and this every other weekend kind of life that you live, especially for those years when you're 6 to 15, that's tough on a kid, because you know you're not sure if you're going to be able to be here for that event in one place or the other. You're always saying hello, you're always saying goodbye, and you know it gets into your brain, I say, and it does affect the kind of parent that you are and the way you see marriage. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that can be negative. Thankfully, that's not been the case.
Two powerful images in my mind as I read your book. One, your mother lying on the floor with you because that's the only place she could find some comfort from the pain.
Yeah.
She lies there all night and sleeps right beside you.
I'd hurt my back.
You'd hurt your back, and the only place for relief was, so she comes down there with you.
Lays down on the hard floor.
I mean, that's a powerful image. The other powerful image is this sweet grandpa of yours, Earl.
Yeah.
Pipe smoking grandpa, sitting out with you in a field, talking about life, and impressing on you the impact of choices.
Yeah, he was such a wise man. He was not educated the way that most people think of wisdom and education, but he certainly was very, very, very wise and bright.
He became really the anchor in your life, didn't he?
He did. He is still my hero. In fact, I have a book that comes out next year called Making Life Matter, which are seven pieces of wisdom that he gave to me sitting around the dining room table. He imprinted himself in my soul, and was one of God's greatest gifts to me.
Was your dad kind of marginalized by your grandpa in your life?
He was, and we've talked about that. It's very hard to live up to that kind of image, and my dad missed a lot of things very early on that my grandfather filled in the gap. And so, you know, it has taken some time, even as adults, to be able to talk about that and be honest.
How old's your dad now?
62, I believe, 62 or 63.
That's really scary. That's my age.
Well, they started young.
Very scary. I'm deflated.
I look much older than I am.
moving right along. In terms of the HIV diagnosis, you're 16. You're class president. You're almost a scratch golfer. I mean, you're a student in many ways, but you've got a future. Your doctor, who became one of your best friends,
absolutely,
administering factor 8, is it?
Factor 8.
Factor 8. Unwittingly administered some factor 8 that was contaminated with HIV.
That's right.
At 16 years of age, you're given a death sentence. How did that impact you?
I remember standing there in his office, and what had happened is I had actually had eye surgery 10 months earlier. They had not told me for many, many months because they didn't know the psychological impact. But they felt that at the time that I certainly needed to know for a variety of reasons. But standing there and hearing that news, it was like I left my body. I tell people it was like standing over me watching this scene unfold, and it was surreal. And all of a sudden I came back to reality, and I thought to myself, I'm going to die.